Welcome to Story Time with Chris Horner. Now, in today's story, I want to talk a little bit about Paris-Roubaix and about the tire issue that I saw everybody make comments on yesterday's Beyond the Coverage story when I had talked about mechanicals and flat tires being part of the reason why Paris-Roubaix riders Jumbo-Visma's had such bad luck at Sunday's Paris-Roubaix edition in 2023. But I want to mix it in with a little bit of story time too, because the 2009 Tour de France was a big time objective for Team Astana, which I was on because Alberto Contador and Lance Armstrong were both on the team. So I figured I could give you guys a little bit of story time and talk about the tire issue at Paris-Roubaix directly here in story time and mix the two just a little bit. Now, yesterday's on Beyond the Coverage, of course, I'd mentioned all those flats from Jumbo-Visma, and I mentioned the mechanicals, but I had never once talked about their sponsor, the Victoria Tires, being at fault for those flat tires or those mechanicals issues that they had throughout the 2023 Paris-Roubaix. And Alpecin de Koenig has the same tire sponsor, Victoria, which didn't have flat tires. Now, I saw some guys' comments. They said, Chris, you just didn't do your homework at all. Both teams ride the same tires. But then I commented back and I said, I never brought up the tire issue because anytime you're talking about tires, you would have to know not only what brand tires they're running, but which model tire they're running, what air pressure they're running, which types of rims they're running, if they're riding wider rims with narrower tires, so then the tire's a little more exposed, or if they're running narrow rims with wider tires. Or if the mechanic just isn't a good mechanic and he should have ran 60 PSI or 80 PSI or ran it at 50 PSI. It's impossible for me to know. So I couldn't make the comment yesterday on Beyond the Coverage of whether or not it was a tire issue or whether or not if it was a mechanical issue from something else being caused. And it gave me a great way to lead into story time here for 2009. Now, like I told you, Alberto Contador and Lance Armstrong are both on the team. And there's a big rivalry between the two guys, much bigger than it was led out to believe on the press. The press is saying it's big, the team's downplaying it, but what it really was really big. So there was always tension in the team. Now, as we're going into 2009, I crashed at Tour of California. I got on a super leaned out diet and stuff and dropped some LBs, and I was riding really good when I went into that year's 2009 Giro d'Italia. Now, when we were there at the Giro d'Italia, after stage 9, I'm sitting 8th on the general classification, about 1 minute 20, 1 minute 30 down on the general classification. But I'm believing I can go top 5 at this Giro d'Italia, if not podium. But there's some other problems because we got Levi Leipheimer on the team at that year's Giro too, and he was going really well. And we had Lance Armstrong at that Giro, and sometimes you got to look after the big guy because you can't leave Lance Armstrong back there all by himself. So if you get a little bit of play, I thought I'd have some really good fitness and come into that Giro. By the end, I thought I could go top 5. But after stage 9, when we went into stage 10, like I said, I'm sitting top 10 on the general classification, and then I crashed early in that stage 10, ended up breaking my leg, but just a small fracture, so I was able to finish the stage, lost some time on the general classification, and then the next day I realized I had a broken leg when I tried to get out of bed, and the leg collapsed on me, and I fell back into bed. I knew it was time for me to go home. I go back to San Diego. I'm relaxing at San Diego. And I'm trying to get ready for the 2009 Tour de France because that is the big objective of the team, is this 2009 Tour de France with Lance Armstrong and Alberto Contador. So you can imagine the stress in the team. Now, few weeks, 2 weeks before we get into the 2009 Tour de France, I'm getting a telephone call from Johan Bernal, and he's saying, Chris, we need you to go up to Aspen and train with Levi Leipheimer and Lance Armstrong. I said, Johan, I don't want to be in Aspen, okay? I want to stay in San Diego. It's incredibly warm there. It's nice. I have all my stuff set up there. You got your cars, you got your kitchen, you got your Tempur-Pedic bed, everything set up, and I know the training roads. Why do I want to change my normal familiarity of the San Diego training roads for the Aspen roads and up there training with Levi Leipheimer and Lance Armstrong when I'm recovering from a broken leg? Those guys might just smash me to death, and then all of a sudden I can't make the Tour de France squad. Johan assured me that I was going to the Tour de France and that he would not take it into consideration how I looked at the training ride up there with Levi and Lance. So, okay, I jumped in my Volvo car and I headed up the road in the Volvo all packed up with my wife on the side. We're driving up there, got her bikes, got spare bikes, got wheels in the back of the Volvo wagon, and then we're heading up to Aspen. We get up there, it turns into kind of almost a nightmare. Like the training is terrible in Aspen. I don't understand why Lance would live up there. I don't understand why any professional cyclist would live up there other than the altitude, but I'm not a big believer in altitude. So for me, I didn't like it. It's a little bit cold. The altitude's too high for me. The power's too low in your training. And honestly, for training roads, you could go up the hill or you could go down the hill. That maybe one little road going this way and one little road this way that connected to the main road that went up and down the hill. And every afternoon there was a snowstorm at the top of the hill sometime around 3:30. So I really didn't like going there. But I was told, you got to go. We need somebody to train with Lance. So I get up there trying to make the most of it. And Lance has really set up a house just two houses down from his. That's extremely nice. The big guy did not leave us hanging with bad digs there, because we were staying in something that was really beautiful overlooking the mountain range and the ski resorts. It was quite nice. So we got kind of a little adjusted to it, and I'm getting into the flow of things. And then as we start getting near the time when you're supposed to have your tickets booked to take off for the Tour de France, my ticket just isn't showing up. It's not showing up. It's not showing up. Finally, after a few days, I'm calling Johan. It'll be there soon. I'm calling the secretary there for Astana, and I'm saying, where's my ticket? Oh, it's coming soon. It's coming soon. And days are going by. And finally, I get the call and realize that I'm not going to that 2009 Tour de France. And Johan Bernal tells me that the story was Alberto Contador just would not have one more American on the team. He was worried between the battle between himself and Lance Armstrong, and if there was too many Americans on the team, he thought, of course, it would separate the team and leave him isolated, and everyone would focus just on Lance Armstrong. Now, I'm telling you up here as a teammate, I would have never done that. I would have always gone the way of whoever's the best riders, the one I would have looked after 100%. But Alberto Contador didn't have that same faith, so they left me off the team. Now, as I'm leaving Aspen, I end up leaving a couple days early because I was frustrated, but I did get some good talks with Lance Armstrong in the morning, and he was telling me about a new team they were building with Radio Shack. But he didn't mention it as Radio Shack. He just said they'll bring it out in the Tour de France, and he'd love to have me on the team. And I said, that'd be fantastic. So I load up my car, and I'm leaving early. I'm leaving Aspen, and I'm still frustrated and upset. But I tell my wife, just meet me down the highway. And I start training down the highway, and my wife's in the Volvo V70R wagon that we had at the time. And I'm out there on the highway for a long time before finally my wife finds me, and she's got the spare tire on the back wheel of the Volvo V7090. And I said, what happened? She said, the tires blew out. I looked at the other tire that was still original on the back side of the back car, and I realized the inside of the tires were just burning up like crazy on the inside of the Volvo wagon, and thought, we'll be lucky if we can make it into the next town. So I throw my bike on the roof, and we jump in the car, drive to the next town, and I buy 4 new tires for the car. We drive it into Utah, and all of a sudden we're there at Park City going out on a training ride with my wife. It's like 95 degrees, super fantastic weather, and I'm frustrated. This is now, I got forced to go up to Aspen. I got kicked off the Tour de France team. The tires on the Volvo are blowing out, and now I'm on a training ride with my wife, and we're coming off of one of those mountain roads from Park City, dropping down in the bike lane 100%, and a couple teenagers come by in this shiny brand new Volkswagen Jetta, and one of them yells out the window about how he's going to kill my wife if she gets back in the road ever again. Okay, so back then you're upset. I'm already missing the Tour de France. I got the tension up high and all that stuff, and I just had a couple little snot-nosed teenagers talk about how they were going to kill my wife. Luckily for them, the light turns green. I start chasing behind, and they take off, and then they make a right turn, and they're pulling into some city pool area. When they pull into the parking lot, well, I pull into the parking lot too. The kids realize that I'm in the parking lot, and now I'm upset. They start revving up the engine there on their daddy's little brand new Volkswagen Jetta, and they come at me, and then they hit the brakes, and I step off my bike and slam the cranks into the side mirror and pull daddy's brand new shiny mirror off his Volkswagen Jetta. They're all like stepping on the gas through the parking lot, and I told them if they get out of the car, I'm going to kill both of them. So they jet out of the parking lot and they take off, and I ride back with my wife to the hotel, and now I got to go back over to the Volvo dealer there in Park City because I got to discuss what's happening with these tires. Now I get in there and I'm hot, sweaty and stuff, and I'm wearing just a pair of shorts and a t-shirt. And as I get over there, because I rode my bike after I showered, rode my bike over in the shorts and t-shirt. Now I'm talking with the service manager over there, and he's talking about how we got this Volvo so packed that's why the tires are burning up on the Volvo. Well, I looked at the service manager and I said, really? I go, my wife, she weighs less than me and I weigh 137 pounds. And then I go to pull my shirt up and show him what a professional cyclist looks like as he's telling me that this car is way too low and that's why the tires are burning up. He looks at me and then he goes, okay, I understand, but you got a ton of stuff in the back of your car. And I said, really? I got a ton of stuff. I go, I'm a professional cyclist and our bikes weigh about 17 pounds and the stuff in the back is one toolbox and a couple bike parts and then a bunch of bike wheels and bike bags. So we go back to the back of the cars. I'm now really frustrated. Remember, I am not doing the Tour de France. I've driven all the way up to Aspen from Bend, Oregon, all the way back, and I got to drive back down to San Diego, which I'd already driven from San Diego to Oregon to begin with. And now I've done a lot of driving, done a lot of training, had some tires blow out of my car, almost killed a couple kids, took a mirror off a Volkswagen Jetta, and now I'm sitting there listening to the dealer who's telling me that the whole reason these tires are blowing up is because I have the car overloaded. Well, we're at the back of the trunk of the car there, and I lift up the back hatch window there, and I pull open the car, and all of a sudden, I'm looking at them as I'm throwing bags, spike bags out in the parking lot. I mean, they're spread out all over the parking lot, just flying into place. I'm like, really? This is what's wearing out the tires as I'm throwing the bags, and they're floating in the air like Frisbees. You know how those wheel tires are, right? That are empty. They're just catching the air, and they're flying all over the parking lot and stuff. And then I turn around, I look up at him. I was like, you think that's what was burning the tires up? And he looks back at me, and he goes, okay, I understand, we got a tire problem. And I said, no, we don't have a tire problem. We have a car issue problem. We got a suspension issue problem. We have an alignment issue, or we have a wheel problem, but we don't have a tire problem because the tires are perfectly fine. So yesterday at Paris-Roubaix, when I'm talking about the mechanicals and the tires going flat, I got to apologize a little bit to you guys because I was a mechanic for 9 years. I was racing my bike for 25 years. And so when I start talking about mechanical issues and people come back and they say, well, they're all running Victoria tires. I never said it was a Victoria tire issue. Just like the Volvo story there getting ready for the 2009 Tour de France, it wasn't a tire issue. 2 days ago at Paris-Roubaix in 2023, of course, could it be a tire issue? It could be, I don't know, but that's why when we're talking about the butterfly effect beyond the coverage, and here, of course, it's story time at Chris Horner, I would never tell you it's a tire story unless I knew for sure it's a tire story. But in order to know if it's a tire story that's blowing out and having those mechanicals for Jumbo-Visma, I need to know how much air pressure was running in the tire. Are we running, is it a 140-pound rider? Is it a 180-pound rider? Are they running deep dish wheels? Are they running narrow, small dish wheels? Because remember, small dish wheels will flex a little bit more, which will give a little bit more cushion. A deep dish carbon wheel is going to be more stiff, so it's going to give less cushion, which means you need to adjust the air pressure accordingly. Now, tire width, the rim width changes quite a bit too. So if you're running a wider rim, you got to run a wider tire, or you're not going to have the right coverage. That's why on the butterfly effect and beyond the coverage, I never said this was a Victoria tire issue. I just said it's a mechanical and flat issue that's going on for Jumbo-Visma, because the amount of homework you'd have to do in order to figure out what was causing the problem is massive. Just like the Volvo dealer, the amount of work that was going to require for him to solve the problem, which he couldn't. Basically, they just sent me on the road, and I had to drive the car back to San Diego, bring it to that mechanic, and that mechanic's way of deciding whether or not it was a suspension issue or alignment issue was to put 5 mechanics in the car, wait till another Volvo V70 shows up, and then put those same 5 mechanics into that car and measure the 2 suspensions. And that was his highly technical way of trying to figure out if it was a tire issue or not. So when we talk about the different mechanical problems at Paris-Roubaix, remember there's so many factors that can play into that, just like with my Volvo car, which they never solved. Basically, I just had to buy new tires every 17,000 miles because the back tires always kept burning out on the inside. So when we're talking about that and I'm mentioning things, if I specifically talk, hey, it's Victoria tires, then I would specifically have the ability to go up there and examine the bike. But if I'm just saying it's flats, it could be any reason, right? Like I said, with rims, with tire width, with air pressure especially, do you have a good mechanic or a bad mechanic, and is this pressure gauge working correctly? Or it could even come down to, and this is rare, but it is true, I've had it happen, where bikes, the frame itself can affect the way the bike handles on the road. We had issues with that when I was riding with Astana and Radio Shack, and we had issues with the frames being too stiff and they would slide too much. And so we had to go back to Trek and we had to complain a bit that they overbuilt or did something wrong with the frame because the bike was handling different. So keep in mind when it comes to all the materials, everything will affect the tires, but the tires, just like on my Volvo V70R, the tires are going to be the first thing that show the effect, right? Whether if you have a stiff frame that's too stiff, that doesn't give any give back there. And so when we're talking about Alpecin Deceuninck, their mechanic might be running their tires at 60 or 70 PSI, and it might have worked perfect with Matthew Vanderpool, but then with Wout van Aert riding a Cervelo, maybe it's his frame is too stiff, and then all of a sudden you need to adjust the air pressure for a stiffer frame, and that was causing the problems there at Paris-Roubaix. We don't know. The amount of different possibilities is massive, and that's why I keep things a little bit more vague. But I do apologize a little bit because I should have been a little more clear when I was talking on Beyond the Covers and said those specific details that it could be the rims, it could be the tire, it could be the air pressure, it could be the mechanic, could even be the frame, lots of different things. But hopefully Jumbo-Visma can figure out their problems because they certainly have some kind of mechanical issue or personnel issue inflating the tires that caused the problems, just like my V70R, which never got solved. And when we look at Jumbo-Visma's 2022 Paris-Roubaix, they had problems there, and then they had problems in 2023 that never got solved. So hopefully, when we're talking about Jumbo-Visma, they don't just have to sell that car in order to get the problem fixed. Either way, I hope you guys enjoyed Story Time here with Chris Horner. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next edition real soon.